I thought we were just helping our friend. Until we discovered she had another reason to get close. Chapter 1. When friendship knocked on our door. The autumn rain fell softly over Manhattan's Upper West Side, creating a shimmering mirror of streetlights and the glow from apartment windows. It was late October, and New York City seemed caught between the rush of fall activities and the quiet anticipation of the holidays ahead. Emma and Claire walked hand in hand down Columbus Avenue, sharing an oversized umbrella decorated with small polka dots, the kind of simple gesture that carried years of silent understanding, a bond built carefully through patience and genuine love. Claire was 31 and worked as a sustainability consultant for architectural firms, meticulous and analytical by nature. Her projects came to life through detailed environmental impact assessments and innovative green building strategies, but her heart operated on intuition and warmth. Especially when it came to Emma, she had shoulder-length auburn hair that she usually wore in a practical ponytail, hazel eyes that radiated both intelligence and kindness, and a wardrobe of tailored blazers that made her look perpetually professional yet approachable. Emma, 28, taught English literature at a public high school in Brooklyn. She had a poetic perspective on everything, including life's contradictions and disappointments. She saw beauty where others saw obstacles, found metaphors in everyday situations, and believed every person carried a story worth hearing. Her long, wavy black hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her deep brown eyes sparkled with constant curiosity about the world around her. It was precisely this ability to transform the ordinary into something extraordinary that Claire loved most about Emma. While Claire organized the world into neat mental categories and spreadsheets, Emma viewed it as a wild garden full of infinite possibilities. Together, they found balance. Emma brought poetry to Claire's pragmatism, and Claire offered structure to Emma's dreams. They had been together for 4 years, since meeting at a community book club in Brooklyn. Claire had attended reluctantly, dragged along by a coworker. Emma was there because she loved discussing literature with passionate readers. Their eyes met during a heated debate about Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, and something inexplicable happened. That sensation of instant recognition, as if they had known each other in another lifetime. Now they shared a cozy one-bedroom apartment in the neighborhood of Park Slope, Brooklyn, a place that perfectly reflected the fusion of their personalities. The space was warm and inviting, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves crammed with everything from classic literature to contemporary design magazines, thriving potted plants that Claire tended religiously, a worn but comfortable sectional sofa where they spent hours talking about everything and nothing, and a small balcony where they drank coffee on lazy Sunday mornings. They had created a peaceful life together, made of evening walks through Prospect Park, plans for trips they hadn't taken yet, but that fueled animated conversations, and dreams that matured slowly, without urgency. They didn't feel pressured to follow social timelines or conventional expectations. They simply lived, building day by day a solid relationship based on respect, admiration, and genuine love. It was in the midst of this calm and predictable routine that Vanessa appeared, like a stone thrown into a still pond, creating ripples that neither of them could foresee. Vanessa had been Emma's college roommate at NYU, but they had lost touch about 8 years ago, shortly after graduation when their lives took different paths. The memories Emma had of Vanessa were all golden with nostalgia. The spontaneous girl who always invented creative adventures, who defended underclassmen from bullies, who had contagious energy capable of transforming any ordinary moment into something memorable. The reconnection happened unexpectedly. One ordinary November afternoon, while Emma graded essays in the teacher's lounge, her phone buzzed with an Instagram notification. The message read, "Hey Emma, not sure if you remember me. Vanessa from NYU, saw your profile pic and got so nostalgic. How have you been? It's been forever." Emma felt an immediate wave of nostalgia. Of course she remembered Vanessa. How could she forget? She responded right away, excited about the virtual reunion. Messages flowed naturally over the following days. Vanessa explained that she had moved to New York City 6 months earlier from Austin, Texas, that she was trying to establish herself as a freelance brand strategist specializing in small business digital marketing, and that she didn't know many people in the city, beyond superficial professional contacts. There was something in the tone of Vanessa's messages, between genuine nostalgia and veiled urgency, that touched Emma deeply. She had always been this way, unable to ignore when someone needed help. It was a characteristic that Claire admired, but also worried about, because Emma often put herself second to help others. After a week of Instagram conversations, Emma suggested they meet in person. Vanessa agreed immediately, showing enthusiasm that seemed genuine, but also slightly excessive. They arranged to meet at a coffee shop in Greenwich Village, a bohemian neighborhood known for its artistic atmosphere and historic brownstone buildings. Claire came along to the meeting. Not out of jealousy, there had never been reason for that in their relationship, but because of an intuition she couldn't rationally explain. It was as if something in her subconscious was sending warning signals that her conscious mind couldn't fully process yet. The chosen cafe was small and charming, with exposed brick walls, hanging Edison bulbs, and the intense aroma of freshly roasted coffee filling the air. Emma and Claire arrived first and chose a table near the window overlooking the bustling street. A few minutes later, Vanessa rushed in, her eyes searching until she found them. She looked different from the girl Emma remembered from college, but years do that to everyone. Vanessa was now 28, the same age as Emma. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun with rebellious strands escaping around her face. She wore simple clothes, faded skinny jeans, an olive green oversized sweater that had seen better days, and worn Converse sneakers. There was visible exhaustion in her face, marked by subtle dark circles under her eyes, but her blue-green eyes still sparkled with that energy Emma remembered from their youth. "Emma, oh my God, you look exactly the same. Still gorgeous," Vanessa said, hugging her with surprising force. The embrace lasted several seconds longer than would be natural for a casual reunion. Claire noticed but said nothing. Emma, always warm and affectionate, returned the hug with genuine enthusiasm. "Vanessa, it's so good to see you. Let me introduce you to Claire, my girlfriend." Vanessa turned to Claire with a smile that seemed rehearsed, extending her hand. "Nice to meet you, Claire. Emma's told me a lot about you already." "Pleasure," Claire responded, shaking the offered hand politely, but maintaining certain emotional distance. They sat down and ordered coffee. Vanessa began talking almost immediately, as if she had been storing words for years and finally found receptive ears. She talked about her life in New York, about how the transition from Austin had been more difficult than she imagined. She spoke about her work as a freelance brand strategist, the difficult clients, the impossible deadlines, the sleepless nights trying to deliver perfect projects that were rarely properly valued. "It's just so hard, you know? Sometimes I wonder if I made the right decision coming here. The city is too big, people are distant, and I feel so lost," Vanessa said, looking directly at Emma with vulnerability that seemed genuine. Emma felt her heart tighten. She knew well that feeling of loneliness that big cities can cause, especially for those without an established support network. Claire, more pragmatic, asked questions about Vanessa's work, offered some professional contacts that might be useful, practical suggestions that demonstrated goodwill without creating deep emotional bonds. But Emma went further. She offered friendship, said Vanessa could count on them for anything, that New York was less scary when you had real friends. Vanessa smiled, her eyes shining, not just with gratitude, but with something more that none of the three could name in that moment. The meeting extended for almost 3 hours. When they finally said goodbye, it was already evening, and the streets of Greenwich Village were bustling with the characteristic nightlife of the neighborhood. Vanessa hugged Emma again, this time an even longer embrace, and thanked them repeatedly for their company and willingness to help. On the way back home on the subway, Claire remained silent for long minutes. Emma noticed and asked, "What did you think of her?" Claire took time to respond, choosing her words carefully. "She seems to be going through a tough time." "She really does. I felt bad for her." "Me too. But Emma, just be careful, okay? Careful about what?" "I don't know. Just a feeling." Emma laughed, kissing Claire's cheek. "You worry too much. Vanessa just needs friends, nothing more than that." But Claire couldn't shake that uncomfortable feeling that had settled in her chest. And in the days to come, this intuition would prove more accurate than she would like to admit. In the days following that first meeting, Vanessa began appearing more frequently in Emma and Claire's life. First, it was casual messages, good morning texts, good night wishes, funny memes found on the internet. Then came invitations for more coffee dates, venting sessions about work, requests for advice about professional situations. Emma always responded with attention and care. Claire responded when necessary, but maintained cordial distance. She didn't want to be unfair to Vanessa, but she also didn't want this new presence to disturb the carefully constructed balance in her relationship. 2 weeks after the first meeting, Vanessa showed up at the apartment unannounced. It was a Friday evening, and Emma and Claire were preparing a quiet dinner together. When the doorbell rang, Emma went to answer, surprised to see Vanessa on the other side, holding a bottle of wine and wearing a shy smile. "Sorry for just showing up like this, unannounced. I had a terrible day, lost an important client I was sure would sign, and I didn't have anyone to talk to. Brought wine as an apology for the intrusion," Vanessa said, her eyes glistening with barely contained tears. Emma felt her heart tighten again. How could she send away someone who clearly needed support? She opened the door completely, inviting Vanessa inside. Claire, in the kitchen, heard Vanessa's voice and sighed quietly, but said nothing. She set an extra plate on the table. That evening extended much longer than planned. Vanessa told stories about her college days with Emma, reminiscing about moments that seemed golden under nostalgia's light. The late-night study sessions, the impromptu dance parties in their dorm room, the adolescent confidences about first loves and broken hearts. Emma laughed, diving into the memories with genuine pleasure. Claire observed, participating little, feeling increasingly like a spectator in her own home. The wine emptied. Vanessa apologized for the late hour, but made no move to leave. It wasn't until well past midnight that she finally stood up, hugged Emma for a long time, and thanked her for the wonderful evening. When the door finally closed, the apartment fell silent. Emma began collecting wine glasses and plates, still smiling from the revived memories. Claire watched her, leaning against the kitchen doorframe. "She's really lost, isn't she?" Emma said, carrying plates to the sink. "Yeah," Claire responded, but her tone carried a reservation that Emma couldn't or wouldn't decipher. "I think we should help her more, introduce her to other people, invite her out with us. We're already helping Emma, but we could do more. She doesn't have anyone here," Claire sighed, approaching Emma and hugging her from behind. "Okay, but let's take it slow, all right? Our space is important too." Emma turned and kissed Claire softly. "Of course. Thank you for being so understanding." But as they lay in bed that night, Claire stayed awake for hours, staring at the ceiling in the darkness, unable to shake the feeling that something was about to change, and not for the better. If you've ever believed that opening your home to someone could change the course of your story, stay until the end of this narrative. This story might touch you more than you imagine. And if you're enjoying it, go ahead and hit that like button. Chapter 2. When Care Becomes Constant Presence. The following weeks became a constant back and forth between Emma and Claire's apartment in Park Slope and the tiny studio where Vanessa lived, located on a noisy street in the East Village near Tompkins Square Park. Vanessa's place was minuscule, barely fitting a twin bed, a desk with a laptop, and some improvised shelves. The walls were thin enough to hear neighbors' conversations, and the smell of mold mixed with fresh paint indicated a recent but poorly done renovation. Vanessa always seemed to need something. One time, she showed up saying her stove was broken and she couldn't cook. Another time, she called late at night because loneliness felt too heavy and she couldn't sleep. There was always a reason, some legitimate, others questionable, to seek out Emma and Claire. Claire, with her practical and organized nature, began to seriously resent the endless visits. She worked on complex sustainability projects that required absolute concentration, needed silence to review environmental impact assessments and draft detailed reports, and Vanessa's constant presence completely disrupted the routine carefully built over the years. Her mornings were sacred. She woke early, did yoga, ate a peaceful breakfast while reviewing emails, and started work. But with Vanessa showing up at any hour, often staying until late, this rhythm had been completely disturbed. Claire was sleeping poorly, work was piling up, and she felt tension increasing day by day. Emma, however, saw in Vanessa a friend who needed support during a difficult phase and believed that empathy was the right path. that helping was a moral duty for those privileged enough to be doing well. She had always been this way. Since childhood, she took in stray animals, defended classmates who suffered bullying, offered help before it was even asked. It was an essential part of who Emma was, and Claire had always admired this characteristic, even when it became inconvenient. Discussions between the couple began subtly, disguised as casual conversations that hid growing frustrations. One evening, while preparing dinner together, Claire finally expressed her concerns more directly. "Babe, we need to talk about Vanessa." Emma stopped chopping vegetables and looked at Claire. "What about her?" "She's coming here almost every day, and I know she needs help, but it's affecting our routine." "Claire, she doesn't have anyone here. We can be her safe harbor for a while. It doesn't cost us anything." "Yes, it does, Emma. It costs our peace, our privacy, our time together. Before, we had our quiet evenings, talked about our days, made plans. Now it feels like we're always hosting company." Emma sighed, feeling torn between loyalty to her friend and love for her partner. "I know. But sometimes it seems like you don't like her. You barely talk to Vanessa when she's here." "It's not that I don't like her. I just think helping doesn't mean giving up our peace. There are healthy boundaries, Emma. You're being unfair. Vanessa is going through a hard time." "I'm not being unfair. I just think we need to establish some rules. Like, she should give us a heads up before coming over, not stay so late. Things like that." Emma felt a pang of irritation. Since when did they need rules to help a friend? But she didn't want to fight with Claire, so she agreed vaguely, without really committing to concrete changes. Even after the conversation, the situation continued. Vanessa kept showing up, and Emma kept welcoming her with open arms. Gradually, Vanessa's presence infiltrated their daily life in increasingly deep and subtle ways. She began leaving things behind at the apartment. A cardigan hanging by the entrance, a design book on the coffee table, a toothbrush in the bathroom for when she stayed late and needed to brush her teeth before heading home. Small objects that marked territory almost imperceptibly. Vanessa also started cooking when she was there. She said she wanted to reciprocate the hospitality, so she prepared elaborate dishes that always impressed Emma. Perfectly creamy mushroom risotto, flavorful shrimp étouffée, key lime pies with meringue that melted in your mouth. Claire had to admit Vanessa cooked very well, better than both of them. But this only increased her discomfort. It was as if Vanessa was claiming space in the home through gastronomy. Additionally, Vanessa helped with cleaning without being asked. She washed dishes, swept the floor, organized the living room. Emma thought this was wonderful. Finally, someone who contributed instead of just receiving. But Claire saw it with different eyes. To her, each of Vanessa's gestures was a way of making herself indispensable, of creating an emotional debt impossible to repay. Vanessa also had a special talent for storytelling. Her narratives about eccentric clients were hilarious. The entrepreneur who wanted a logo with 20 different colors, the client who changed her mind every single day, the startup that expected professional quality work but wanted to pay with exposure. She made Emma laugh in a way Claire hadn't seen in a while, with that loose and genuine laughter that lit up her entire face. But something began to change in the dynamic. Small tensions arose, almost imperceptible at first, but growing gradually like cracks in a wall. Vanessa's glances began lasting a bit longer than would be natural. When Emma spoke, Vanessa watched her with an intensity that went beyond normal friend attention. Her eyes traced the contours of Emma's face, fixed on her lips when she talked, followed her gestures with interest that seemed to transcend friendship. The compliments also became more frequent and specific. They were no longer just, "You look nice today," but detailed observations. "That shade of lipstick perfectly brings out your brown eyes. I love how your hair falls over your shoulders when you're concentrating on reading. Your laugh is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." And most uncomfortable of all, the way Vanessa talked about love. Whenever the subject came up, in movies, books, random conversations, her words seemed to carry double meaning, as if she were talking about her own feelings disguised as general reflections. One afternoon, while Emma graded papers at the dining table, and Vanessa worked on her laptop on the couch, the friend suddenly commented, "You know, Emma, you have such a beautiful way of seeing the world. It must be incredible to be loved by you. Claire is so lucky." Emma looked up from the papers, surprised by the comment. Oh, thanks. But loving isn't about me, you know. It's about building together, about choosing every day to stay by someone's side. Yeah, but some people are lucky enough to find someone willing to build. Others just watch from afar, wishing they could be part of something like that. There was a melancholy in Vanessa's tone that made Emma uncomfortable, but she didn't know how to respond. She chose to change the subject, returning her attention to the papers. Claire, working in the makeshift office in the bedroom, heard the conversation through the partially open door. Her stomach tightened. That wasn't a casual observation. It was a disguised confession, a test to see how Emma would react. The following days brought more of these ambiguous moments. Vanessa started sending Emma messages during the early morning hours, random thoughts that couldn't wait until morning, poems she had found that made her think of Emma, songs that reminded her of their friendship. 3:42 a.m. Woke up thinking about how some people mark our lives in ways they don't even imagine. You're one of those people for me. 2:28 m. Found this Maya Angelou poem and immediately thought of you. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. The story of knowing you is one I'll never forget. 4:15 am. Can't sleep. Keep thinking about how different things would be if we'd stayed in touch all these years. How many conversations we missed, how much time we wasted apart. Emma responded with kindness, not realizing that each response fed something that was growing dangerously. She saw the messages as venting from a lonely friend fighting insomnia and the solitude of the big city. She didn't see the pattern that Claire saw clearly, the gradual escalation of forced intimacy, the attempt to create a connection that transcended friendship. Claire observed everything in silence, feeling anxiety grow. The atmosphere at home, previously always light and loving, now carried something invisible, a thread of contained electricity that threatened to break at any moment. One afternoon, while the three of them prepared dinner together, Vanessa made a comment that finally broke the tense silence. You two are so perfect together. Like those couples in movies, you know? It actually makes me envious seeing how you complete each other. The good kind, of course. The kind of envy that comes from admiration. Claire stopped dicing tomatoes and looked directly at Vanessa, her eyes conveying a firmness that wasn't in her voice. Good envy doesn't exist, Vanessa. Either you sincerely admire, or you envy with resentment. They're completely different things, and people tend to confuse one with the other. The silence that followed was awkward and heavy. Emma, always the peacemaker, tried to lighten the mood with a joke about her limited culinary skills, but the tension was already installed and palpable. Vanessa laughed, but the laugh sounded forced. You're right, Claire. I guess what I feel is a mixture of both. That night, after Vanessa finally left, earlier than usual, claiming exhaustion, Claire vented to Emma more directly than before. Emma, we really need to talk about this. Seriously. About what, exactly? About Vanessa. About the way she looks at you. About the early morning messages. About the comments loaded with double meaning. About everything. Emma sighed, tired and a bit irritated. Claire, you're exaggerating. Vanessa is just lonely, going through a hard time. She doesn't have ulterior motives. It's not just that, and you know it. Or you should know it. What do you want me to do? Abandon her because you're jealous? The word jealous fell like a bomb between them. Claire felt like she'd been slapped. This isn't jealousy, Emma. It's intuition. It's noticing behavioral patterns that you're refusing to see because you don't want to admit you might be being manipulated. Manipulated? Now Vanessa is manipulative? Are you hearing yourself? I am. And you should be listening too. Emma got up from the bed, grabbed a pillow, and went to the living room couch. It was the first time in 4 years they had slept apart because of a fight. The apartment, always welcoming, felt cold and strange that night. Claire lay awake, staring at the ceiling in the darkness, silent tears sliding down her temples. She wasn't jealous in the traditional sense. She completely trusted Emma, but she was afraid of losing her partner to something more dangerous than physical betrayal. The emotional manipulation happening right before her eyes while Emma stubbornly refused to see it. And this denial, although born from good intentions and a genuinely kind heart, was opening a dangerous crack in a relationship that had always been solid as rock. What if the help you offer becomes the path to chaos? Have you felt this? If you're following this story and want to see how it ends, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. What comes next will make you even more tense. Chapter 3. Secrets in the Silence. The beginning of the new semester brought Emma more work, but also more doubts and internal conflicts she preferred not to face. Her days were completely filled with morning and afternoon classes, grading tests and assignments that piled up, endless staff meetings that extended into early evening, and planning creative lessons that would truly engage her teenage students. She arrived home exhausted, physically and emotionally drained, but still found energy to respond to Vanessa's messages, which were becoming increasingly frequent, intense, and personal. It was as if Vanessa had a sensor that detected exactly when Emma was most vulnerable, most receptive to words of support and understanding. The messages were no longer limited to the early morning hours. They arrived at all times, during breakfast, between classes, during lunch, mid-afternoon, before bed. Each one carried a subtle urgency, as if Vanessa constantly needed Emma's attention to keep functioning. "Good morning. Woke up thinking about you today. Hope your day is as amazing as you are. How are classes going? Your students are so lucky to have a teacher who genuinely cares. I miss you. It's been almost 2 days since we saw each other. Can I come over tonight? Sorry to bother you, but I'm having an awful day, and just imagining talking to you already makes me feel better." Certain gestures from Vanessa when they were together also left Emma increasingly confused and uncomfortable. A hand touch that lasted 1, 2, 3 seconds longer than would be natural for a friend. Fingers that briefly intertwined before letting go. A hand on the shoulder that slowly slid down the arm. Hugs that were always a bit tighter, a bit longer than they should be. There were also the compliments about Emma's perfume. Vanessa always commented on how unforgettable it was, how she found herself thinking about that scent during the day, how sometimes she woke up thinking she could smell that fragrance in the air. Emma tried to see this as an innocent compliment, but something in her gut knew there was more meaning there. Emma spoke little about these discomforts with Claire, fearing it would seem like paranoia, or worse still, that it would confirm all the suspicions her girlfriend had been expressing for weeks. She didn't want to admit that maybe Claire had been right from the beginning, didn't want to accept that her kindness could have been so seriously misinterpreted, but Claire perfectly perceived what wasn't being said. Her intuition was on maximum alert, and the emotional distance between the couple grew silently, like a poisonous plant developing in the shadows. They still shared the same bed, but there was a coldness that didn't exist before. They talked about superficial things, bills to pay, weekly commitments, household chores, but avoided the deeper subjects that truly mattered. Until one Thursday afternoon, everything changed. Claire had an important meeting scheduled with a potential client to present a sustainability project that had consumed weeks of intensive work, but at the last minute, the client canceled, citing an unexpected emergency. Frustrated but relieved to have an unexpected free afternoon, Claire decided to go home early. It was approximately 3 p.m. when she opened the apartment door. The first thing she noticed was that the door wasn't locked, just pushed closed. Her heart immediately accelerated. They always locked the door, without exception. It was a basic security rule in New York City. Upon entering, she found Vanessa alone in the living room, her back to the door, completely focused on Emma's books on the shelf. She didn't immediately notice Claire's presence. So absorbed was she in what she was doing. "Vanessa," Claire said, holding the key in her hand, trying to control her tone of voice. Vanessa turned abruptly, startled, eyes wide. Her reaction was instantaneous. She quickly tried to hide something among the books, but she wasn't fast enough. "Oh, Claire, you scared me. I didn't hear you come in," Vanessa said, her voice a tone higher than normal. "The door was unlocked." "Oh, was it? Sorry. Emma gave me the spare key because I was going to wait for her here. She said she'd be home by 4. Claire looked at the clock on the wall, 3:15. Emma rarely got home before 6 on weekdays. "I see. And what were you doing?" Claire asked, walking slowly toward the bookshelf. "Oh, nothing really. Just curious. I love her books. I was looking at the notes she makes in the margins. Emma has such a unique way of interpreting literature. Claire walked to the shelf and directly grabbed the object Vanessa had tried to hide. It was Emma's journal, a leather-bound notebook, worn from use, that Emma kept there between an edition of Toni Morrison and another of James Baldwin. That journal was sacred. It was where Emma wrote personal memories, intimate thoughts she didn't share even with Claire, fragments of poems she invented during sleepless nights, deep reflections about their relationship, and about life in general. Claire knew of the journal's existence but had never read it. Respecting her partner's privacy was fundamental to her. "Vanessa, this is private," Claire said, holding the journal with both hands, trying to stay calm but feeling anger rise like volcanic lava. "I know, Claire. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have touched it. It's just, the things Emma writes are so beautiful, so deep. I just wanted to understand what she really feels, you know? Understand what goes through her mind." "Understand what she feels? Vanessa, you have absolutely no right to invade her privacy this way. This is completely disrespectful." Vanessa lowered her head, assuming a posture of regret that seemed too theatrical to be genuine. "You're right. It was very wrong of me. But sometimes I feel like you two have something so special, so perfect, that I'll never be able to have. And I just wanted to feel a little bit of that, understand what it's like to be loved like that." Claire felt a mixture of compassion and fury. Part of her understood Vanessa's loneliness, but the other part, the larger part, was furious at this grotesque invasion of privacy. "Vanessa, I'm going to ask you to leave now, and I'm going to need the key back." Vanessa hesitated, as if about to argue, but something in Claire's gaze made her reconsider. She pulled the key from her pocket and handed it over, her fingers trembling slightly. "I'm sorry, Claire. Really. I know." After Vanessa left, Claire locked the door carefully and stood there for long minutes, Emma's journal in her hands, her heart beating irregularly. She didn't want to violate Emma's privacy by reading the journal, but she needed to know what Vanessa had discovered there, what had motivated her to invade something so intimate. She put the journal back on the same shelf where it had always been, then sat on the couch and waited for Emma to arrive. Each minute felt like an eternity. When Emma finally got home, it was almost 6:30. She entered tired, tossing her bag on the couch and taking off her shoes with a sigh of relief. "What a day," she started to say, but stopped seeing Claire's expression. "What happened? We need to talk. Now," Claire said, without beating around the bush. Emma sat down slowly, fatigue giving way to concern. "You're scaring me. What is it?" "I came home early today, and I found Vanessa here, alone, reading your journal." The silence that followed was absolute. Emma processed the information slowly, as if the words took time to make sense. "Read my journal?" Her voice came out low, almost an incredulous whisper. "Yes. I caught her in the act. And when I confronted her, she said she wanted to understand what you feel." Emma brought her hands to her face, breathing deeply. She felt a turbulent mixture of emotions: anger at being betrayed like this, confusion at not understanding the motives, and a deep shame for having allowed someone to cross so many boundaries. "Oh my God, how could she do that? Emma, this isn't normal friend behavior. You need to understand that what's happening here isn't healthy friendship. It's obsession." Emma didn't respond immediately. She sat there, trying to process everything, trying to reconcile the Vanessa she knew from college with this person who invaded journals and crossed intimate boundaries. That night, Emma decided to call Vanessa. She needed to hear an explanation, needed to understand. Claire stayed by her side in silent support, while Emma dialed the number with trembling fingers. Vanessa answered on the second ring, her voice loaded with anxiety. "Emma? Are you okay?" "No, Vanessa. I'm not okay. Claire told me what you did." Silence on the other end of the line. Then a deep, heavy sigh. "Emma, I shouldn't have done that. I know. It was wrong. It was invasive. But I needed to understand. Understand what, Vanessa? What's in my journal that you needed to know so badly? What you feel. If what you write about Claire is everything you're capable of feeling, or if there's still room in your heart for someone else." If I have any chance. The confession fell like a nuclear bomb, destroying any vestiges of ambiguity that still remained. Emma froze, unable to respond, the phone shaking in her hand. Vanessa, what are you saying? I'm telling you the truth, Emma. I fell in love with you, and I know it's wrong. I know you're with Claire. I know I should have stayed away, but I can't keep pretending this doesn't exist anymore. Since I reconnected with you, since that first time I saw you at that cafe, I knew I'd felt something beyond friendship. The confession fell like a bomb. Emma hung up the phone without responding, her hands trembling. Claire observed everything from the kitchen, her heart breaking not because of the revelation itself, but from fear of what would come next. That night, Emma cried. Claire held her without saying anything. And the silence that followed was devastating, not because words were missing, but because both knew that nothing would ever be the same as before. Have you ever trusted someone so much that you didn't realize the line between friendship and manipulation had been crossed? Leave in the comments if you've experienced something like this, and subscribe to the channel because this story isn't over yet. Chapter 4. When Truth Demands Confrontation. After that night of painful revelations and shared tears, the harmony between Emma and Claire had broken, but paradoxically, they were also closer than they had been in weeks. That's how crises sometimes work. They destroy fragile structures, but strengthen solid foundations. Vanessa completely withdrew for a few days after the phone call. She sent only sparse messages, vague apology attempts that didn't seem sincere, pathetic tries to justify the unjustifiable with excuses about loneliness and depression, empty promises that something like this would never happen again. Emma blocked Vanessa's number on all messaging apps. It was a difficult decision that initially made her feel guilty. After all, Vanessa had been important to her in the past. But Claire helped her understand that protecting her own mental peace wasn't cruelty. It was necessary self-care. Emma felt deep and corrosive guilt for having allowed such invasion into her life and relationship. She constantly questioned herself during sleepless nights. Had she given wrong signals? Had she been too naive in not noticing the obvious clues? Had her actions somehow encouraged Vanessa's inappropriate feelings? These questions tormented her, especially during classes when her mind wandered while students did exercises. Claire needed to reassure Emma repeatedly that none of what happened was her fault. Kindness is not an invitation for emotional harassment. Empathy doesn't justify boundary violations. Meanwhile, Claire tried to balance unconditional love for her partner with her own fears and insecurities. She was afraid. Not that Emma would trade her for Vanessa, she never doubted that. But that the damage caused to their mutual trust might be irreparable, that Vanessa's shadow would remain between them forever, like a ghost haunting relationships even after the physical person has gone. Conversations between Emma and Claire became different during this period. No longer tense and superficial as they had been during the weeks of conflict, but also not completely carefree as they were before. There was a new awareness, a fragility that both recognized and tried to navigate carefully. Small disagreements still arose about trivial things, dirty dishes in the sink, forgotten commitments, accumulated fatigue, but both knew these minor arguments hid the real problem still not completely resolved. Trust had been shaken not between them, but in the safe structure they had built together over 4 years. They had created a small but solid world where they felt protected from external difficulties. And Vanessa had invaded that sanctuary, leaving marks that would take time to disappear completely. "Do you still talk to her?" Claire asked one Saturday morning while they drank coffee on the balcony, watching the slow movement of the street below. "No. I blocked her number everywhere," Emma responded, absently stirring her coffee. "Really?" Claire seemed surprised and relieved at the same time. "Really? Claire, I don't want to lose you because of this. Vanessa was important to me in the past, but you are my present and my future. You always were. You always will be." Claire squeezed Emma's hand across the small table, intertwining their fingers, her eyes welling with emotion. "I know you love me, Emma. I never doubted that. Not for a second. But I'm afraid we've lost our peace. That lightness that was always between us, you know. We'll get it back. I promise. It might take time, but we can do it." Claire nodded, wanting to believe those words with all the strength of her heart. But not everything is resolved just with promises and good intentions. A few days later, on a rainy Tuesday that reminded them of the day it all began, Vanessa appeared again. She didn't call ahead, didn't send a message asking permission. She simply rang the apartment doorbell insistently, repeatedly, as if her urgency could justify the invasion. Claire was home alone, working on an urgent project. When she heard the doorbell ring for the 5th consecutive time, she got up irritated and went to answer. Seeing Vanessa through the peephole, her first instinct was to ignore it, pretend no one was home. But something made her open the door. Perhaps the need to end this once and for all. Vanessa was soaked from the rain, hair stuck to her face, eyes red indicating she had been crying recently. But her posture was different from other times. There was no more performative vulnerability, no rehearsed shyness. There was only cold determination, almost desperate. "I need to talk to both of you," Vanessa said, without asking permission or apologizing for showing up unannounced. "Emma's not here. She's at work." "Then I'll wait." "No, Vanessa, you won't wait. You're not welcome here anymore." "Please, Claire, I just need a few minutes. To explain everything properly, to try to fix what I broke." Claire hesitated. Part of her wanted to slam the door in Vanessa's face and end this immediately. But another part knew that until there was a final, definitive confrontation, this would continue haunting all of them like a wound that won't fully heal. "Fine, but only because I want to resolve this once and for all. Come in." Vanessa entered slowly, dripping water on the hardwood floor. She stood there, not knowing where to sit or what to do, waiting for instructions. Claire didn't offer a towel, didn't offer anything. She just picked up her phone and called Emma. "Babe, Vanessa's here. Showed up unannounced. I think we need to resolve this now," she said on the phone, her voice tired. Emma, who was in the teacher's lounge grading essays, felt her stomach turn. "I'm coming home now. Don't let her leave before I get there." "I won't." Half an hour later, Emma arrived home rushed, still in the professional attire she wore for work. She found Vanessa sitting on the couch, Claire standing against the kitchen wall, the atmosphere so tense it seemed possible to cut it with a knife. Emma said nothing initially. She just took off her wet coat and sat in the armchair across from the couch, creating deliberate physical distance between herself and Vanessa. Vanessa took a deep breath, preparing to speak. When she began, her voice was different, colder, more direct, stripped of the artificial sweetness she always used. "I know I messed up. I know I invaded Emma's privacy. That I confessed something I shouldn't have. That I crossed boundaries I shouldn't have crossed, but you also messed up with me." Emma frowned, surprised by the accusatory tone. "How exactly did we mess up with you? You made me believe there was space here. That I was part of your lives, that I belonged in this perfect little world you built. You welcomed me with open arms, included me in everything, made me feel important. And when I realized I wasn't, that I was just a charity project, a good deed to make you feel better about yourselves, it was already too late. I had gotten attached. I had created expectations." Claire crossed her arms, jaw tense. "Vanessa, we wanted to help you because you seemed to need it. That doesn't give you the right to demand anything, much less to turn things around as if we're to blame for your inappropriate feelings." "Inappropriate," Vanessa laughed, but it was a bitter laugh, without joy. "Maybe they're inappropriate, but they didn't come out of nowhere. They were fed. Emma, every smile of yours, every deep conversation we had, every time you listened to me with all that attention, making me feel seen for the first time in years, I confused everything. And you, Claire, with your constant look of judgment, as if I were a problem that needed to be solved, an intruder in your paradise. You two are so united, so complete, so perfect together, that it's impossible not to want to be part of it. It's cruel, actually. Having so much happiness and not realizing how much that hurts someone who's alone." Emma felt her chest tighten. Part of her, the empathetic part that always sought to understand all sides, understood Vanessa's pain. She saw how loneliness can distort perceptions, how desperation for connection can make someone cross lines they should never cross. but another part of her knew that this justified absolutely nothing. Vanessa, friendship isn't possession. Love isn't something you conquer through insistence or forced proximity. We wanted to help you because you seemed to be suffering, that's all. We never promised anything beyond support. We never implied there was room for more than friendship. But there was. There was. Or do you think I imagined everything? The affectionate messages, the long hugs, the way you looked at me when I told my stories? Or was all of that just empty kindness, Emma? Because if it was, then you're more cruel than Claire. At least she was always honest about not wanting me around. Claire approached, placing herself between Vanessa and Emma, her posture protective. Enough, Vanessa. You're distorting everything to make yourself the victim. Emma was kind, because that's who she is, but kindness isn't flirting, welcoming isn't a romantic invitation, and you know that. Deep down, you always knew. Vanessa looked at Claire with a mixture of anger and defeat. I know. You're right. But that doesn't make it any easier to accept. Doesn't make it less painful to realize that what I felt was one-sided. Vanessa, Emma began, her voice softer. I understand your suffering. Really, I do. But you need to understand something. Love can't be asked for like this. Can't be conquered by invading spaces, reading journals, forcing intimacy. And we need to move forward in peace. You also need to move forward in peace. Seek professional help. Work through these issues with someone qualified. Are you saying I'm crazy? No. I'm saying you're suffering and need help that we can't give. I'm saying this has reached a point where it's no longer healthy for anyone. Vanessa remained silent for long moments, processing. When she finally spoke, her voice was broken. All the previous coldness dissolved into pure sadness. I really believed that maybe I had a chance, that maybe you'd look at me and see more than the needy friend, that maybe I could make you happy in a way Claire can't. Emma stood up, approaching carefully. Vanessa, Claire makes me happy in every possible way. Not because she's perfect, but because we built something real, solid, based on mutual respect. And nothing you do will change that. Vanessa looked at Emma one last time, memorizing her features as if it were the last time she'd see her. Her eyes traveled over Emma's face with painful intensity, the deep brown eyes she admired so much, the shape of her lips, the curve of her neck. Then she looked at Claire, who remained there firm, protective, unwavering. I'm leaving now. And this time, it's forever. But I want you to know something. What I felt was real, maybe inappropriate, maybe misguided, but it was real, and I'll carry this forever. We know, Claire said, more gently than she had been in weeks, and we hope you find someone who can reciprocate those feelings in a healthy way. Vanessa nodded, grabbed her soaked bag, and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned one last time. Take care of each other. You have something rare. We will, Emma responded. The door closed with a soft click. Vanessa descended the stairs slowly, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. When she exited the building, the rain had stopped, leaving only that characteristic smell of wet pavement that always comes after storms in New York City. She walked through the streets of Park Slope without destination, tears mixing with raindrops still falling from trees. She didn't know where to go, what to do, how to rebuild her life after having invested so much emotionally in something that never had a chance of materializing. Back in the apartment, Emma collapsed on the couch, emotionally and physically exhausted. Claire sat beside her, pulling her into a tight embrace. It's over, Claire whispered. Finally over. Were we cruel? Emma asked, guilt still present. No, we were honest. And sometimes honesty seems like cruelty to those who don't want to hear the truth. They stayed there, embraced in silence, for long minutes. The apartment, which had become an emotional battlefield in recent weeks, was slowly beginning to recover its sanctuary atmosphere. In the following days, Emma and Claire consciously tried to rebuild the tranquility they had lost. It took time to understand some fundamental truths, that helping someone isn't the same as carrying them indefinitely, that compassion needs limits to be sustainable, and that true love doesn't crumble from external storms when its roots are deep. They talked about everything. Long nighttime dialogues where they exposed fears, insecurities, and hopes. They spoke about the mistakes they made, about the signs they ignored, about the importance of actively protecting what they had built instead of assuming it would be indestructible. Emma recognized that her empathy, while a beautiful quality, needed to be tempered with discernment. Not every request for help should be answered. Not every person who enters our lives deserves complete access to our inner world. Claire recognized she could have been more direct from the beginning, that letting resentment accumulate in silence had been as harmful as Emma's naivety, and gradually, like plants growing back after frost, the lightness returned. Laughter became spontaneous again. Future plans started feeling exciting instead of frightening. They returned to having their Sunday mornings on the balcony, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper in companionable silence. They returned to cooking together, dancing awkwardly through the kitchen while preparing dinner. They returned to dreaming out loud about trips, about apartment changes, about small plans that make life worth living. If this story made you reflect on the limits of help and empathy, about how to protect your relationships without being cruel, comment below what you learned, and subscribe to the channel, because there's still one final chapter that will close this story in a way that will touch your heart. Chapter 5. New Beginnings. 3 months passed since the final confrontation with Vanessa. Spring had arrived in New York City, bringing that characteristic warmth. Afternoons of strong sunshine followed by brief showers that temporarily refreshed the city. The trees in Central Park were vibrant green and blooming, and the city seemed to breathe with more lightness, as if it also needed a pause to recover after difficult times. Emma and Claire had completely regained the lightness that had always characterized their relationship. They learned to laugh again without fear of the past's shadow, to trust without paranoia, to love without guilt or reservations. The experience with Vanessa, though painful and draining, had strengthened their bond in a way they never imagined possible. That's how true relationships work. They're not the ones that never face storms, but those that emerge stronger from each one. Each overcome crisis adds a layer of resilience, a depth that couples who were never tested simply don't possess. One Saturday morning, while drinking coffee on the balcony, the sacred ritual they loved so much, and that represented reconquered normalcy, Emma received a notification on her phone. It was an Instagram message from a number she didn't initially recognize. Emma's heart accelerated when she saw it was from Vanessa. Claire, immediately noticing the change in Emma's expression, gently placed her hand on hers. "Is it her?" she asked, without needing confirmation. "Yeah, I think she created a new account because I had blocked the old one. You don't have to read it now if you don't want to, or ever if you prefer." Emma took a deep breath, considering her options. Part of her wanted to simply delete the message without reading, block again, and pretend it never happened. But another part, that inevitably empathetic part that defined her, felt she needed to know that maybe there was real closure this time. "I want to read it," Emma said, unlocking her phone. The message was different from all the previous ones. There were no dramatic apologies, no exaggerated emotional declarations, no attempts to reopen doors that had been definitively closed. It was simply honest. "Hi, Emma. I know I have no right to reach out after everything that happened, and if you want to block this account too, I'll completely understand. But I wanted you to know some things. I started therapy 2 weeks after that day at your apartment. It was the hardest and most necessary thing I've ever done in my life. I'm understanding a lot about myself, about my behavioral patterns, about how I confuse affection with love, about how my loneliness made me do things I never imagined I was capable of. My therapist helped me see that what I felt for you wasn't real love. It was idealization, projection, desperation for connection. I turned you into a savior because I couldn't save myself, and that was unfair to you, to Claire, and especially to myself. I'm not sending this expecting forgiveness or wanting to resume contact. I'm sending it because you deserve to know that I finally took responsibility for my actions, that I no longer blame you both, that I understand everything was a result of my own unresolved issues. Sorry for everything I caused. Sorry for the invasion, the disrespect, the emotional manipulation. You didn't deserve any of it. I sincerely wish you and Claire all the happiness. You have something special, Something I hope to one day be able to build with someone when I'm truly ready. You don't need to respond. I just needed to say this. Vanessa. Emma read the message aloud to Claire, who listened attentively, her expression gradually softening. When Emma finished, they remained silent for a few moments, processing. Sounds genuine, Claire said finally. It does, Emma agreed. Should we respond? Claire thought carefully before responding. I think that's up to you. I don't have any need to maintain contact. But if you feel you need to respond for your own closure, I support you. Emma looked at the message again, rereading certain parts. There was something different there, a maturity, a self-awareness that didn't exist before. Maybe Vanessa really was working through her issues. Maybe therapy really was helping. But Emma also recognized an important truth. She had no obligation to be part of Vanessa's journey. She could wish the best for her from a distance, without needing to reopen communication channels that had been painfully closed. She decided to send a short response that offered closure without reopening doors. Vanessa, I appreciate the honesty, and I'm glad you're seeking help. I sincerely wish you find peace and build healthy relationships. Take care, Emma. It wasn't effusive, didn't promise future friendship, but it also wasn't cruel. It was simply honest and kind. Exactly what the situation required. After sending the message, Emma blocked the account again, not out of anger, but out of self-care. Sometimes closing doors definitively is the most loving act we can do, both for ourselves and for the other person. Done. It's really over now, Emma said, putting away her phone. Claire smiled, kissing the top of Emma's head. How do you feel? Light. Finally light. Like a cycle that needed to be closed has been closed. That afternoon, they decided to do something symbolic. They went to a bookstore in the West Village. Not the same one where they had first met Vanessa, but a different one, creating new memories instead of revisiting old ones. They bought new books, had coffee at a different place, walked through streets they hadn't yet explored together. Each small act was a silent declaration. They were rebuilding, creating new layers of happy memories that would eventually completely cover the painful ones. In the following months, life resumed not just its normal rhythm, but something even better. Emma returned to fully dedicating herself to work, creating innovative literary projects with her students that gained recognition at the school. One of her projects, an anthology of short stories written by teenagers about identity and belonging, was so well received that the administration decided to publish it in a small print run. Claire finalized a major architectural project that had consumed months of intensive work: the sustainable renovation of a historic cultural space in Lower Manhattan. Her work was praised for its sensitivity in preserving original elements while modernizing the space's functionality. She was promoted to junior partner at the firm, recognition that came with more responsibility, but also deep professional fulfillment. And above all, they returned to dreaming together. Not just vague dreams about someday, but concrete plans they put into motion. They finally booked that trip to the Pacific Northwest they had been postponing for years. They spent a week in a cozy cabin near Mount Rainier in Washington state, where they woke to the sound of birds, hiked through ancient forests, ate fresh salmon at local restaurants, and talked about the future with renewed optimism. It was on this trip, on a starry night by a quiet lake, that Claire finally asked the question she had been holding for months. Emma, will you marry me? There was no extravagant ring, no audience, nothing staged or performative. Just two women sitting on a wooden dock, feet touching the cold water, stars shining above as silent witnesses. Emma felt tears instantly fill her eyes. Seriously? Very seriously. I want to spend the rest of my life building with you. I want to make official what's already been true for years. So, will you marry me? Yes, 1,000 times yes. They kissed there, on the empty dock, while gentle waves lapped at their feet and the entire world seemed small compared to the immensity of what they felt for each other. When they returned to New York, they began planning a simple but meaningful wedding. They didn't want a big party, just close people who truly mattered. They decided to hold the ceremony in their own Park Slope apartment, the place where they had built their life together, where they had overcome storms, where they had learned that true love is a daily choice. They also talked about adopting a dog, something they had always wanted but never felt ready to take on the responsibility. They visited shelters on weekends until they found Cooper, a medium-sized golden retriever mix with expressive eyes and contagious energy that immediately won their hearts. Cooper brought new joy to the apartment. His antics drew laughter. His need for walks forced Emma and Claire to leave the house even on lazy days. His constant presence filled the space with life and movement. They renovated the apartment too, nothing drastic, but symbolic changes. They painted the walls in lighter colors, rearranged furniture to create better energy flow, added more plants that Claire cared for with almost maternal dedication. It was as if they were physically erasing the traces of that difficult period, creating a space that reflected who they were now, not who they had been during the crisis. One evening, Emma returned to writing in her journal, the same one Vanessa had invaded, but which had now completely recovered its status as a personal sanctuary. Sitting on the balcony while Claire worked in the office and Cooper slept curled on the couch, she wrote, "Not all help is simple. Sometimes, when we extend our hand to someone, we don't realize we're opening doors that should remain closed, but all compassion teaches us who we are. And I've learned so much these past months. I learned that loving is also knowing how to say no. It's protecting what we've carefully built. It's choosing, every day, to stay by the side of the person who chooses to stay by ours. I learned that kindness without limits isn't kindness, it's self-destruction disguised as virtue. That empathy needs to walk hand in hand with discernment. And I learned, above all, that true love isn't the kind that never faces challenges. It's the kind that faces storms and emerges stronger. It's the kind that chooses actively, consciously, to remain, even when it would be easier to leave. Claire is my true love, not because our relationship is perfect, but because when it was tested to its limits, we chose to fight for it. We chose to communicate instead of withdrawing. We chose to trust even when trust was shaken. And that choice, renewed every day, is what makes our love real." Claire, passing through the living room at that moment, read over Emma's shoulder and kissed the top of her head tenderly. "Beautiful. You always know how to put into words what I feel but can't express. That's why we complete each other, right?" Emma responded, smiling, closing the journal and intertwining her fingers with Claire's. Meanwhile, across the city, Vanessa was following her own journey. Therapy was truly helping. Weekly sessions where she unpacked old traumas, destructive patterns, deeply rooted fears. She was learning to be alone without feeling lonely, to build her own happiness instead of seeking it in other people. She had started attending support groups for people dealing with emotional dependency. She met other women going through similar struggles, who understood the confusion between neediness and love, who recognized the harmful patterns they had repeated for years. She was slowly rebuilding her life. Not the life she had idealized with Emma, but her own authentic life. She invested in her career, created a stronger portfolio, got some better clients. She moved to a larger, more pleasant apartment in Astoria, Queens. She adopted a cat named Luna, who taught her about unconditional love without expectations. And although she still thought about Emma sometimes, about how things could have been different if she had dealt better with her feelings, she gradually learned to let go. She learned that some people enter our lives to teach us important lessons, not to stay forever. The lesson Sarah and Bianca taught her was painful but necessary. Love cannot be forced, conquered, or manipulated. True love needs to be reciprocal, needs to flow naturally, needs to be built on foundations of mutual respect and conscious choice. 6 months after their last contact, Vanessa ran into Emma by chance at a bookstore in Union Square. It was completely by accident. Neither expected to see the other. There was a moment of mutual recognition, a second frozen in time where both considered their options. Vanessa gave a polite wave from a distance. Emma returned it with a small smile. And that was it. There was no conversation, no drama, no need to say anything. Just the silent acknowledgement that both had moved forward, that the past was past, that they could coexist in the same city without destroying each other's peace. When Emma got home and told Claire about the chance encounter, she expected to feel anxiety or discomfort, but she felt only peaceful indifference. "How did you feel?" Claire asked. "Nothing, actually. Like, she's just someone I once knew, someone who was part of a chapter that's already closed." "That's good," Claire said, smiling. That means you've really let go, and it was true. The chapter had closed completely, definitively, not with anger, not with resentment, but with serene acceptance that some stories need to end so others can begin. As the sun set over the New York City skyline that evening, painting the sky with vibrant shades of orange, pink, and purple, Emma and Claire sat on their balcony with cups of tea, Cooper sleeping at their feet. They didn't need to speak. The silence between them was comfortable, full of mutual understanding accumulated over years of companionship. The story of the three women had transformed into learning, not just for them, but for anyone who believes in the power of starting over, of forgiving without forgetting, of loving with intelligence and discernment. Because in the end, that's exactly what makes us human. The capacity to make serious mistakes, to hurt ourselves and hurt others, and still choose growth. The capacity to learn from our errors, to establish healthy boundaries, to protect what is precious without becoming cruel. And above all, the capacity to choose love, not the idealized love from movies, but real, complex, challenging love. The love that requires daily work, honest communication, genuine forgiveness, and conscious choice. Emma and Claire chose that love, and they would continue choosing it, every day, forever. If this story touched your heart, if it made you reflect on the limits of empathy, the importance of protecting your relationships, and the strength of true love, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Sometimes a simple story can change how we see our own relationships and help us value what truly matters. Thanks for staying until the end. We'll see you in the next story. And remember, true love is the kind that chooses to stay, even when everything tests that choice.